Bruno Bettelheim wrote in his book, The Uses of Enchantment, "Every transformation demands as its price the death of the old self." When I started at Nightingale College in 2017, we served a population of just over 300 students. This year, we're projected to surpass 10,000. Nearly every system, form, process, or structure created to support the population when I started has been restructured, reimagined, or even innovated out of operations as we've grown. At each moment of innovation, we have paused to consider what is the outcome that we have sought to improve and what can we do to impact that goal. To know what and when to change any component of an active system, we must be disciplined to get to the heart of the problem we are trying to solve, or the problem we will be intending to solve will be the reality of sporadic and unpredictable results themselves from manipulations of a system not understood to begin with. Now let's consider how and where we start when we begin to rethink systems that drive outcomes so that we can ultimately arrive at the most meaningful question in this process. What is the problem we are trying to solve? Yet that question is not the first question to ask or the easiest one to arrive at. So to frame an example, as I'm in higher education, we'll use that as the motif. When newspapers post in the headlines that higher education is broken or failing, there is an implicit question being posed around the product of that system not producing the outcomes intended. Let's take a look at last year alone. In Indiana, in 2025, the legislature required cuts of up to 400 programs, which is around 20% of academic programs. Inside Higher Ed reported a loss of over 9,000 jobs in just 2025. And it's estimated that there will be, in 2025 alone, 1.6 trillion outstanding in higher education student debt, with margins highest among vulnerable populations. Now, if the conceit is true, and higher education is failing, what are the inputs into that system, and what are the intended outcomes? And after that, what is the higher educational systemic problem that we are trying to solve? Is the problem the reason that learners are even coming to the institution, the purpose of higher education, or of obtaining that degree or credential? Is it the cost or fee structure, or potentially a perceived return on investment for that, which can tie to the first question? Is it the time required? Is it the curriculum design leading to that skill development? Is it the perceived experiential component of that higher educational model or of the community? Is it the regulatory environment that shapes how those institutions pursue their interaction with their learners? Is it the way in which current tools and technology either are or are not being deployed to meet the current moment, which can be a question of the efficacy of the curriculum or system in achieving skill development? Or is it simply opportunity and access? Now, without a deep dive into these questions and perhaps many more, there may be interventions pursued to change the outcomes, but we still don't know the problem we're trying to solve, and thereby the outcomes that can be achieved or how our efforts will influence them. So to get closer to the ultimate question, let's consider for one moment one of those questions posed. Why are learners coming to higher education? Now, there exist several ontological perspectives and conceptualizations around the purpose of higher education, and for brevity, we will simply look at two of those. On the one side, workforce development, practical, job-ready skills that meet market needs, and many career-oriented professions fall neatly into this category. Some would contend that this is the primary or the value-added construct for higher education, speaking in economic terms on a return on investment, meaning that what I paid for that knowledge or skill is returning to me in economic terms what I would perceive as an appropriate compensation for that investment in time and resources. Now, on the other hand, we can look at a playground of the mind motif, knowledge exploration, critical thinking skills, habits of lifelong learning, even identity exploration and formation. Now, many institutions may view this as a higher or even more noble value-added construct for higher education. One that has sometimes hard to define value-added elements for a wider community or culture, meaning that these may have an impact on the return on investment equation, but the impact factor can be challenging to calculate, as they tend to be more personally perceived than systemically trackable. And here the problem becomes more manifest. The question of what we are measuring as an outcome remains open to discussion. Now, if we're trying to focus on outcomes of the entire higher educational system holistically, and we're declaring it broken, which framework are we focused on addressing? And therefore, what is the problem that we are trying to solve for? If we try to focus on the outcomes of the entire system under the lens of just one side of this discussion, the outcomes sought will look different. And the perspective about what is or is not broken, or even the distance to that desired state, will ultimately remain gapped. And without that clarity as to the outcome we're focused on achieving, any intervention tends to be about as effective as the directions that Alice received from the Cheshire Cat in Lewis Carroll's classic Alice in Wonderland. Alice asks, "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" "Well, that depends a great deal on where you'd like to go," said the cat. "Well, I don't much care where," said Alice. "Well, then it doesn't matter which way you go," said the cat. "Well, so long as I get somewhere," Alice added as an explanation. "Oh, well, you're sure to do that," said the cat, "if you only walk long enough." Now, whether it's a personal outcome, losing weight, or a marketing goal of increasing your market share, or even a production goal of increasing output, the method for rethinking systems design so that we can design a system that will achieve desired results requires the same process type. First, we identify the intended outcomes sought or altered. We compile the many inputs that impact that system. We note the barriers within and the barriers outside of our immediate influence. And then we can narrow in on a space for which an intervention can be applied, i.e., the problem we're trying to solve. Now, these inputs and potential barriers may include regulatory agencies or governmental bodies, financial or pricing frameworks, or technological integration or deployment models. Each, in their various instances, can be supports in achieving current outcomes, or they can be barriers that resist achievement of those outcome goals. It's important to note that not all barriers are detrimental. And in rethinking systems design, it is a best practice not to take down a fence before we know why it was put up. Sometimes it may even be worth pausing to ask if we, the institution, process, or person, are in fact the problem or barrier itself in need of innovation. Rethinking systems is not a virtue in and of itself, and change itself can also be a barrier if that change is not targeted to solving a specific and intended problem that impacts an outcome. So here's the challenge. When you hear of a new initiative, a new process, a new model, a new tool being proposed for implementation, we should be asking, what is the outcome they're seeking to change or achieve? And what is the problem they're trying to solve for? Without either, we neither have a vision for the impact of the innovation or a clear understanding of how our individual contributions to that outcomes will matter. And without those, we may find ourselves singing along with Mr. Toad in the Disney classic film. We're merrily, 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 merrily on our way to nowhere in particular. We're always in a hurry. We have no time to stall. We got to be there, but where, we can't recall. We will surely end up somewhere if we innovate and rethink our systems long enough. However, that is not an intended destination or an outcome that we can rely on. As a colleague once elegantly phrased it, before we start howing things, we have to figure out the why we are howing and the why as a result of the howing. As you look around your life, your work, your family, or your community, or even your nation, consider what outcomes are most impactful to you. And before we start flinging spaghetti at the wall to see how much of it, or if any of it, will stick, let's ask a few questions. As systems are designed to achieve specific results, the results we achieve are therefore produced by the systems we designed. Results are by design. Considering the results of a system, an organization, a product, or any group, we must accept that ultimately success or failure is designed to that end. If we are unhappy with the product or results, we ultimately must rethink the systems currently producing the outcome. So, what would you like to achieve? What is the outcome or destination you hope to arrive at? Great. Let's get started designing a system that will achieve the desired results. What's the problem you're trying to solve for? Thank you.